Hello, welcome to Southern Girl in the City. My name is Dominique Duarte, and I am a singer actor currently living in Brooklyn, New York. So this week has been quite eventful. Um, I don't really speak much on politics on Facebook or social media. I really have not. Um, but here's a little bit of my take. I think um, I honestly think we all need to become more informed voters in general. I feel like people only vote for one or 2 points. So, like, a lot of people voted for someone because of the economy, or someone voted for somebody because of immigration, or they voted for someone because of the abortion laws. Everybody had like most people had like one point that they stick to every single election. Um, Abortion is a big one. I know I'm of Christian faith, and I do believe you shouldn't get an abortion, but I also believe that you shouldn't take someone's free will. The Lord gives us free will to do whatever. I mean, ideally, He wants you to do the things that are in His will, but you have free will for a reason, and so everyone cannot operate under Christian principle when they don't believe in it. So, like, there are plenty of people, most people, um, are not Christian still. So to hold them to a biblical standard doesn't make sense. Even though I believe in it, I cannot force my belief on other people. I can share my belief with other people, but I cannot force it on them. Um, I know a lot of people say our country was founded on Christian values. To some extent, yeah. But nowadays, everything is a little different. America back in the 1700s does not look like America in 2024. Um, so, I think sometimes we just think in black and white. Black and white. Everything is black and white. And the older I get, it is not that simple. To change one law, there are consequences for changing that law. So, for the people who are so focused on the abortion law, when you take away that choice, it also influences other things like how miscarriages are handled, how anything with a woman's reproductive rights are affected by it. It's not just abortions, like, it's other things. I think a lot of people are also uneducated about women's reproductive things. I realized in my 30s that I am very uninformed about it. I've learned more about it because my friends are now having kids and they've had kids. And even the ones who I think have had kids, because every single pregnancy is so different, I think sometimes we make it like, oh, she had a baby. It's just, you're just having a baby. It's just so simple. And it's like, no, I think your body goes through a lot. I've had a few friends who had miscarriages. I've had friends who have had, um, who've had preeclampsia, or had preeclampsia after they gave birth. So I mean, like, sometimes I think we're oversimplifying things. It's like, it's just not black and white. And I think that even the fact that people are saying, unfriend people who have different beliefs because, it's not to agree to disagree. I realize that people grow up in different environments. So I'm from the South, the heart of the Bible Belt. So people in the Bible Belt are going to vote most people are going to vote Republican. Mainly because of that one thing, abortion. That is just what they are going to vote for. They're going to vote not for abortion, but vote to have more stricter laws about it. That's just what it is about growing up in that environment. You learn early on through Christianity that, it's not something that you should do. Even though I believe you shouldn't, I cannot force this on someone else. And that's the problem. It's I agree. I agree with that principle, but also I cannot force other people to believe what I believe. And then also, one law change affects many things. It's not just affecting women getting an abortion or not. It's affecting when they're having a baby, period. A lot of women have complications with pregnancy. So it is a lack of knowledge, I think, on having kids. Because I really truly think unless you have been pregnant or unless you had a spouse who has been pregnant, we really don't know what happens. Until you have experienced it yourself, you really don't know. And then some people just had really easy pregnancies. So they're just like, oh, well, it was easy for me, so it's not that big of a deal. I was like, no, it's a pretty big deal. It's really a medical emergency. I mean, it's a beautiful thing because you're creating life, but you also are... you can have medical complications because it really changes your body. And I used to just think, oh, you just gain weight. It's not just gaining weight. It changes everything about your body. And I did not know. I never even heard of it. I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly. Ectopic pregnancy. I never heard of that before. The egg getting stuck in your fallopian tube. I never, and the fact that it can kill you. I didn't know any of this. I didn't realize so many women get preeclampsia. So many women get it. A lot of black women already are dying when they are going in to have babies because people aren't believing when they're saying that they're not feeling well after the birth. So I really think it's lack of education, and I don't even think it's degrees necessarily, because there are plenty of people with bachelor's, masters who still are uninformed on how everything works. And I admit myself, I could have researched more. I do have to also understand that the president, we learned this in elementary school, but maybe we have forgotten. The president can make many proposals, but the only way they can go into effect is if Congress approves it. So really the most important elections really are the Senate and the House of Representatives. And I admit, I should be more informed about the House of Representatives and the Senate. And I think that sometimes I have not done all of my diligent research when it comes to voting. But the economy is another one. So a lot of people said, during Biden's administration, the economy was really struggling. And, things are really high. Things are really expensive. I think one fact that's not really considered is that the pandemic was not that long ago. I still don't really know how much the president can really affect the economy. I think there's so many factors with the economy. I did not realize. I even researched. I'm like, why are eggs so high? Google it. Apparently, inflation can be caused by wars. So if there's wars in other countries, that affects our economy. The pandemic did not really officially end until like early 2023. So that's not that long ago. It takes a while to recover from something like a pandemic economically. We had a significant economic loss, and Biden came in 2021, right at the beginning, really, of it. It had gone on about a year. It was close to a year when he got inaugurated. But the first part of his presidency was just trying to get us through the pandemic. And then a lot of businesses didn't make it through the pandemic. But the businesses that did make it through the pandemic probably had to raise their prices because they lost revenue. And I did not realize even what's probably going on in Israel, what's going on in Palestine, all of that affects our economy. And I don't think that the president can make proposals to help with the economy. But even if he makes proposals, and let's say Congress approves those proposals, it takes forever for it to come into effect. Case in point, Trump was the one who helped overturn Roe versus Wade, but it wasn't officially official until 2022 when he was already out of office. So when a president, maybe when they're in office, they are passing policies, but those policies are not always effective immediately. It could take a year or two. Even let's say that the policy was approved and everything went through while they were president. We don't see the consequences or the positives or negatives until years later. No Child Left Behind, case in point. Bush was the one that initiated that policy. It was passed, and then it went on from 2001 all the way up until 2015. Apparently it ended. I didn't know that because people still talk about No Child Left Behind like it's still a thing, and apparently it stopped in 2015, which wasn't that long ago. That was 10 years ago. So not quite. Yeah, I mean, we're almost in 2025, so it was 10 years ago basically. This is something that I was uneducated about, the fact that a policy could be passed, or the process of the policy getting passed is so long that you don't see anything until after that president is out of office sometimes. So Biden came in during a rough time because he came in during the pandemic. He also came in during all of the things that are happening with Israel and Palestine and Ukraine. Like, all of that was happening during his presidency. And then during Trump's presidency, the main thing was the pandemic. That came at the very tail end of his presidency. Like that final year, the election year, we were dealing with the pandemic. But I think currently there are policies. Apparently, there's even still a tax thing that he did that's still influencing us today. So I don't really think we understand how government works. Like, I really think there is a significant lack of knowledge about government, about economics, and I think is, once again, and it's funny because apparently Trump's wanting to pull money from the DOE. And I think it's interesting because other countries who do well with education, they pour a lot of money into education. But America keeps pulling the money from education. And it's like, if your citizens are lacking education, or they're not getting as strong of an education as they could get, they're going to be uninformed voters, and it's going to cause you to only focus on whatever it is that is in your community that is your immediate need. Like, eggs are too high. Like, we got to be on biblical principle. The Congress and the government needs to be on biblical principle because I believe in biblical principle. I'm like, I believe in biblical principle, but I don't necessarily think it should necessarily be involved in government. It's not it would be fine if everyone believed that. Like, if we were all on the same page with religion, then, or with Christianity, that would be one thing. But we're not. Everyone is a different. America is a melting pot of different religions, of different belief systems. So, ideally, yeah, it'd be nice if we could incorporate more Christian principle into things, but you can't force it on people. Like, you just can't. Like, because it doesn't work. Because then it turns people off and they feel like you don't have empathy. Like, sometimes I feel like it's so dogmatic with the Christianity. It's so dogmatic that there's no empathy, which is very much like the Pharisees. They were so legalistic that they didn't have empathy for other people. Put yourself in the shoes of a woman who's even considering having an abortion. It's not an easy decision that they are making. That is not an easy decision at all. And you'd say, well, it shouldn't even be on the table. But that's because you're living a different life than them. Now that I have been exposed to inner city life, I have a completely different view about the world. Because I gotta say, if you grew up in poverty, and you didn't have a lot of positive influence around you, you're going to make a lot of decisions that may not be the best. And I'm not meaning being sexually active maybe when you were too young, or being sexually active when you were not prepared financially. I mean, most of us have had, for me personally, I'm just going to be honest, I'm not sexually active. I never have been sexually active. I am abstinent and have been my entire adult life. So for me, getting pregnant ain't been an option because I don't have the sex. So, and it doesn't mean that's going to be forever, but ideally I did want to wait to marriage to have sex. That's what I wanted. And that's my belief. But I can't pressure other people to believe that. I do think maybe kids are better off when they have a 2-parent household. I do think I've seen that firsthand. It's very important when they have 2 parents in the household. I do think it makes a huge difference in how they're educated and how they're supported. It makes a difference. So, I've never really been a very political person. I wasn't necessarily the person who was doing debates and things. I honestly am not even sure. I registered Democrat, but I registered Democrat because most black people, let's just be real, are told by their parents to register Democrat. But Democrat is definitely more in alignment with what I believe. However, I would say both sides are on the extreme ends. I think Republicans seem to think so conservatively that there's no grace. And then I feel like maybe the Democrats think so wide that it's almost too much. I really think my belief system might be more in the middle. And I think a lot more people are in the middle. A lot more people in the middle than I think are willing to admit. I might believe some things here and believe some things there, but if you think in a very extreme black and white way, you just are limiting yourself, but also limiting others, because you didn't walk in their shoes. You don't know what they're going through. I don't know their story. I haven't been in their shoes. And I know that women women are also shamed when they, let's say they decide, okay, I'm going to have my child. I'm going to have it. I'm going to do it myself. They're shamed for it a lot of the times for being a single parent. They are shamed for needing assistance. I mean, I was in line in Target, and there was this woman who was shaming this woman because she had food stamps. And a lot of the times, especially black women, it can be really lonely, and it sometimes just feels like you don't get a lot of support. And a lot of the times, apparently the statistic is high with us with abortion, but I'm still not sure about that myself, because I'm like, apparently abortions cost money, or they did. And like, we don't be having money like that. So I don't know how we would have paid for it. And as many women as I see, black women with kids, I'm like, I don't think it doesn't seem like they're having them, but they could be. I don't know. Statistically, that is brought up that a lot of minorities have abortions. But minorities also tend to live more in poverty. They're struggling to support themselves, let alone a child. And it's not that the child isn't beautiful, and it's not that life is not important. I do believe that life begins at conception. It does. I didn't always believe that. I do believe it begins at conception. I do believe that it begins in conception. Sorry. It is a life. However, it's just complicated. It seems like it's a black and white answer, but it's really not. Anybody that's even considering that is usually in a very dire situation, and a lot of the times they are single. Being a single parent is just really difficult. And then two, there's a lot of people that shame parents. They shame the parent. Well, you don't know what you're doing. Their kid is out of control. You don't know what you're doing. This constant shaming of parents. So it's just like, it's like you damned if you do, damned if you don't. You don't want the person to have an abortion, but then you also, when the kid is here, they're not getting financial help. Or if they get financial help, they're shamed. If their kid they're not doing the parenting the way you feel like they should, then they're a menace to society. So it's just like, I don't know. And then also with kids now in schools having one thing that is a little confusing to me is that a lot of the times the people who do support, that are so passionate about being pro-life are also very pro no gun control, which I find very interesting. Because at the end of the day, that one is weird to me. I'm not gonna lie. But I also can see that perspective too. So as a black person, I can't speak for every black person, but most black people do not have a positive relationship with guns. We don't really have access to them unless we are living in maybe the inner city, and maybe we're in the streets and we're doing illegal stuff. But I'm like, most black people, or maybe they're in law enforcement, or maybe they have a reason, they're in security. That's different. And sometimes they may have a gun for protection. But like, other than that, I've never seen a gun in real life. None of my family members that I know even own a gun. I think my grandfather might. But I was like, I don't think my relatives own guns. Like, we don't play. It's not even on the table of something that is discussed. I don't. But then I went to college in Kentucky, and I learned that for a lot of white families, guns are very recreational. It's something they do for fun. So they have a very different relationship with guns than maybe a black family would have. Because for us, I think it's more of violence, and we're thinking it's just like not something you should be associated with. But then in the white community, it's more, this is something we do as a family, and it's very different. I think one of the things I've learned as an adult, because I've been around a lot of white people, I've also been around a lot of black people. And one of the things I noticed is that we don't really know each other's cultures that well. We all think, well, it's just American culture. But I'm like, well, American culture is a melting pot of different cultures. So the black culture has a very different way of dealing with things, a very different way of being. And white people do too. So I think, other than maybe at work, we don't really interact with one another on a personal level all the time. Like, I do think, like in college, I interacted probably the most with white people, but as an adult, not as much. But I do think sometimes there's still a prejudice on both sides because you don't really understand their worldview because it's so foreign to you. A lot of the people I went to college with were from small towns. So when you're from a small town, you just don't have the same mentality of someone who grew up in a city. Typically, you're going to be around the same people all the time. You might have gone away to college, maybe, but some didn't do that. I think most of America is rural. You have cities, of course. We have Washington, D.C., and New York, and Memphis, and Detroit, and L.A., San Francisco. And those cities are going to have a lot more minorities. But typically, most of America is rural, which means that everybody's kind of living in a bubble. And you just aren't exposed too much, which is why I have a hard time with cutting people off because they believe in something else. Because I got people, apparently, I found out more this election than in the past. That there are quite a few people that I'm Facebook friends with I didn't realize were supportive of him. But, yeah, they are. Black and white. Because a lot of people be like, oh, well, white people. No, black people are supportive of him too. I know quite a few, actually. Mainly because of that one point, abortion. Like, that's the main hill that Christians will die on, is that one. When it really isn't black and white. It's just not black and white. And I think with the guns in particular, I guess because guns are used to kill, I guess I'm kind of confused why a lot of people who do have conservative views are pro-gun, but then they're also pro-life. Like, that doesn't make sense to me still. Because I've never, like I said, I never even touched a gun. I have never really seen it other than TV. Like, in real life, I never have been around guns. Like, it's not something that I have associated with. So I don't really understand the relationship with just having to have one. I guess it's because you feel like you need to protect yourself, but then I've never felt like I needed a gun. It's like I've lived in America now. I'll be 35 in a couple weeks, but 10 days. I have never felt like I needed a gun, like ever. I'm not. And then the thing about gun control is really just about, hey, let's put some regulations on this. It's not, hey, you can't have a gun at all, which is kind of the narrative I feel like I see with that argument is like, well, guns aren't the problem, people are. But people are the ones who are using it. The gun didn't just get up by itself and walk. And no, people are the ones who are dealing with guns. People are. I agree. But if you know people are flawed and they're human beings with flaws, and we have plenty of people with mental health issues who are not getting treated because we do not have great mental health care in this country. So there are plenty of people who are mentally unstable who are getting access to guns, and that is why we have all these school shootings and all of these shootings in all these random places. That would be we have a lot of issues in our country. That's not even a question. How did I feel about the election? I honestly wasn't that surprised that she lost, mainly because most of America's pretty daggone conservative, and I don't think that they're ready for a woman president, but also not ready for a black woman president. If they didn't vote for Hillary, to me, my reason I voted for Kamala and the reason I voted for Hillary was because I thought that they had a lot of experience at the job, like to do the job. So, once again, I think a lack of education oversimplifies government. Government is not an easy thing to understand. I mean, just when I voted this last time, I had to read those amendment questions several times because it was so confusing. So I'm like, if you have someone in government who has been in government as long as she has and as long as Hillary has, it makes sense that they would be qualified for the job. And that was my reasoning. I don't understand. Trump does say a lot of inciting things, like not insightful, but inciting, INCITE things. And I guess people just overlook that in order to, I don't know. I'm not surprised. America has come a long way. It really has. And sometimes I also think that America is a baby country compared to many others. I mean, we can't compare ourselves to China or compare ourselves to France because we have only been around not even 250 years. We're really an infant in country years, like as far as how long we've been around. It makes sense that we would have all these issues because we are still really young. 250 years seems like a really long time, or 248, I think. Seems like a really long time for a country, but it's really not. And considering how long we have only been around for 200 and something years, we have made a lot of progress. We can't deny that we haven't made progress. However, I just think we're not as educated as we could or should be about government, about election. I just think it's like, I sometimes feel like voting now or voting period, a lot of the time seems like it's treated like a high school election, where you really do need to inform yourself about things. And I think that, I mean, people were saying that Kamala wasn't saying her policies or really speaking her policies, but I was like, from what I've heard from Trump, I didn't feel like he was really saying anything either. Like, he was saying a lot of things, but he wasn't saying anything, other than, just the same, like, I don't know, like, it just didn't seem like he was saying much of anything. Also, I think a lot of I did read the Project 2025, and I was like, oh, this is intense. I actually do think people voted against their own interest in a way, because yeah, you voted for him because he's gonna make stricter abortion and immigration laws, but then he might actually do some things that are going to negatively affect a lot of us. Not just the Democrats. It's going to affect you too. Going to affect everybody, because I think that because Trump has always had money, he cannot relate to the average Joe. So any of the things that he's proposing will help the rich, but will it help the everyday American? No. Um. So yeah. I don't know. I think politics does get so cutthroat, and it gets so. I mean, I remember when I was younger, I just never liked to discuss it because one, was not sure of my own views, and then two, there's so much shaming about it. There's so much shaming. And I'm trying not to be shaming people because they supported him, because at the end of the day, they had their reasons. They must have. And I know people say, well, they just supported hatred, and I'm like, well, he did say a lot of hateful things. That's not a question. But I also, once again, it's not black and white. Black and white thinking is dangerous. I mean, I do think that that's why he's getting that Hitler comparison a lot of the times, because he is very black and white, black and white, black and white. And that's never good, because when you think in black and white, I do think it becomes really dangerous. I just think that you have to have grace, and the grace has to be in there somewhere. And a lot of Christians that I know are really legalistic. It's like it's either this or that. There's no in between, and there is in between. Especially because if you're dealing with women who are not of faith, it's like I can't tell them what to do. I could maybe make a suggestion, but am I going to be raising the child with them? Because people will say all day, every day, well, we'll help you. It takes a village. But a lot of the times, women, as a single black woman currently, I feel like I'm so alone. I can't imagine having a child. And I'm not saying that I would have an abortion. No. I'm just saying I understand the loneliness that a lot of women feel, and that when you have a kid and you're a single parent, you are on your own, and people do not step up to help you, and they really don't step up to help black women. Do you feel like maybe that we were thrown under the bus a little bit? Yeah, a little bit. Kind of. I thought it was interesting that 92% of black women voted for her. I don't know. I just feel like I couldn't have voted against my own people, I guess, in a sense, because, I mean, Trump wasn't saying anything that was going to benefit me as a black woman. Not really. But once again, he could make policies during his presidency, right? And let's say the Supreme Court of the Congress does do what he's proposing. Once again, you are not going to see the fruit, or I won't even call it fruit, but you're not going to see the pros or the cons of it until years later. And this is the concept that is not being understood about the presidency. What the president is doing during their term is you're not going to see the end result until later on. So everyone's always focused on, well, what happened when that person was in office? What's happening when the person's in office? And I read this book called The Slight Edge, and I'm currently reading this book called Atomic Habits. And both of those books, the emphasis is on the daily decisions you make that make the change. They're daily decisions that make the change. So I know it seems like the economy is doing this. But there are multiple reasons for that. And the president really doesn't have a lot of weight on this. I do think they can make policies and make change, but you're not going to see the fruit of it until later. If Biden put in any policies, you're not going to see them until when Trump is in office. And when Trump puts in policies, he can propose them while he's in office, and you won't see it until the next president is in office. That is how this works. I am just now learning that at 34 going on 35, that the president, when they're in office, is making proposals. And you know the court system takes forever. Like anything having to do with law, it takes a long time. Murder trials, any of that stuff takes years sometimes. So anything that he's proposing, or anything that Biden or anything that Obama proposed, wasn't going into effect like this. So, and even if it did go into effect immediately, you don't see the pros and the cons of it until later. And because a lot of people said when Trump was in office, the economy was better. I'm like, well, first of all, y'all, the pandemic happened in 2020, which was his last year as president. The first 3 years, we was not in a pandemic. So, of course, our economy was better. Also, it's possible that maybe some of the things that Obama had proposed had helped our economy be better while he was in office. It's possible that maybe when Biden was in office, some of the things that Trump did while he was in office might have affected Biden's administration. Like, it all goes together. And I do think, child, we just uneducated about economics. We uneducated about government. We don't know. People went to the votes and was like, eggs are high, I'm voting for Trump. And it's like, y'all, that's not how this works. Of course, eggs were lower when Trump was in office because we didn't have a pandemic until the final year. His election year was when we had the pandemic. We have to recover from that. It's been a while, but it ain't been that long. It's been yeah. So, black and white thinking is just not it. And I felt like that Jesus was, it's not even felt like, every example in the Bible about Jesus basically shows that he was not a black and white thinker. Yes, the woman committed adultery, but we still need to give her grace. So, if a woman is considering an abortion, instead of shaming her, maybe try to put yourself in her shoes. If she's even thinking about doing that, that means that she is in a dire situation. And have some empathy. And I think it's interesting that people voted for someone who has no empathy. And even when he was being shot at, you know, the Secret Service was trying to protect him, and he was inciting the crowd, and it's like, inciting like INCITE. I gotta spell it out because I'm not saying he's insightful or no. He was inciting the crowd, and it made the Secret Service be in more danger, because you should have empathy, and he doesn't have empathy for anyone. And I understand that we do need to give him grace, I guess, but why would you want someone who doesn't have empathy to be the president? It just doesn't make sense. But I don't know, I guess it's very American, because I think America does focus on themselves, focus on me, Focus on what I want, what I think, it's me. And that's just, a lot of other countries are more collective. And it just seems like they work as a team. And a lot of the times, America is just working on divisiveness. Yeah, I don't know. But, I mean, I'm not surprised by the results. It's pretty much reflective of our country's lack of education when it comes to economics and government. And I'm going to make it my mission to become more educated myself, because I could become more educated myself. Another thing that I do think is interesting is that people are saying, well, God put him in office, or God did this, God did that. I don't think God does. I do think that God does a lot of things. He has a lot of influence in things. But is he doing everything? Sometimes. Because the Lord does give us free will. We're the ones who are making these things happen. People voted for him. But yeah, people voted for him. It just is what it is. I feel like the information is also a little bit skewed. So I do think that because of social media, we are not getting the same information. I really truly believe that we are not getting the same information. I feel like I'm getting what I want to hear, and the Republicans or Trump supporters are getting what they want to hear. And then this causes confusion. I do think that when I thought back to the first election that I can remember as a child, Bob Dole versus Clinton, I remember we were watching TV and they were talking about it all the time. I feel like when we were just watching television and reading the newspapers, I felt like we were all getting similar information. And now you can Google anything, you can Wikipedia anything, you can get information on anything to support what you believe. For me, I voted for Kamala because I know she had experience in government, and I know that it is not an easy thing to be in government, and that it is a very complex thing to be in government. So to have someone who's not knowledgeable about those things is scary, because you need to know about government to be the president. Like, you need to be very, very, very informed on doing this. This is not a game to be president. Like, it's a real big job, and you need to know what you're doing. And I don't think he really does. I think that he knows what to say to get people to support him. And I just think it's very telling. I do think social media could have also influenced him winning both times when I think about it. One of the things I had to also realize, though, is like, you don't always get your own way. And I lately, this year was really challenging and in my personal life. And so, like, I really think that we have to also learn that we're not always going to get our own way. And that it's not an easy thing to swallow. But I think it's something that I try to teach the students that I work with all the time, is that you don't always get what you want. You do not always get what you want. You just don't. And I don't know if everything... I believe that the Lord has his hand in things, and I do believe that the Lord has a plan. However, I also think that we influence the plan, or we get in the way of the plan. We do things because we have free will. So we do things that influence other things. Case in point, if someone drives drunk, that person, that was not God that caused the accident. It was a drunk driver that caused the accident. The drunk driver decided, I'm going to get in a car and I'm going to drive. That is his free will that he used poorly, and it affected someone negatively. So just because he was put in office doesn't mean that that was the will of the Lord. I don't know. I doubt it. I think that people chose to vote for him, so he got elected. That's how it works. But does that mean the Lord had anything to do with it? Not necessarily. I don't think the Lord is involved in things that are against his will. However, I guess some people could say that goes with the abortion thing too. Like, well, the Lord wouldn't want you to do that. I agree that the Lord wouldn't want you to do that. However, the Lord gives you free will to make your own decision. He would pray and hope that you'd make the one that he would like, but many times we as humans are flawed, so we're not always going to do what he wants us to do. I don't think he would want us to post such nasty messages either side. That wouldn't be Christian either, or that wouldn't be kind, or throw it in other people's faces that he won, or like, it just is. Show some maturity. Like, we're all adults, just be mature. I do think also we misunderstand Christianity. People who follow Christianity, I do feel like, do not really understand it. I think that you could follow it all your life, and I've met people who have, and they still seem like they're not getting the real true blue message of Christianity is love. Like, you all I can do is focus on how am I showing up in the world, and how am I helping to be a light in the world. That is what we are focused on. You cannot focus on controlling everyone else's decisions and everyone else and how they live their life. That's not what we're called to do. You're called to be a light. And you can say something insightful. You can maybe try to get the person to change their mind, but you have to have a relationship with that person before they would even consider listening to you. I think one of the missing pieces in America is just empathy and compassion, and unity. Because I'll be honest, it's ironic that our name is United States of America, because I'd never really felt like we were very united. We're just not that united. I mean, even during the pandemic, we weren't united. Everybody was arguing about masks. So it's just like, there's just so much division about everything. Everything is an argument. Everything is a fight. Which is why for a long time, I just really kept my mouth shut about politics, because I just didn't want to be more showing, I feel like if I say something, someone's going to shame me. I feel like if I say something that's different from them, that they're not going to believe in what I'm saying. But as a Christian, just show up and be the best you that you can be. Be like Christ. What would the Lord do? Sure, the Lord might say, don't have an abortion. However, the Lord is not going to try to control you to do what he wants you to do. He gives you free will. And one of the nicest gifts he gives us is free will. And yeah, it'd be great if everybody modeled Christian principles, whatever, but that's just not it. And it never has been. I mean, even you read the Bible, you know that there's plenty of people who had other different beliefs. Always. and I guess now I'm starting to understand more and more the separation of church and state, because that would be like saying that everybody at your job needs to do everything according to your belief system. But then that's taking away their freedom to do what they want like to do. You can encourage people, but you also have to focus on building the relationship with the person. I had a relative who gave me advice, and I think I was frustrated more with the advice, not because he gave me advice, but because we didn't have the relationship with each other. Like, relationship is so important, and sometimes I feel like we're so dogmatic on everything that we're not making room to have relationship with one another. And maybe if we focus more on not just having a superficial hi, how are you, or hey, I'm fine conversation, and actually really getting to know one another on a deeper level, maybe we could have more empathy for one another. But just have some empathy. Because honestly, I do think that was what Christ had, that I think a lot of us lack, is empathy. Empathy for the Trump supporter, empathy for the Democratic supporter that you don't agree with, empathy for the people who didn't vote, because they obviously, it would have been great if they did. That would have been wonderful. But once again, there's just so much shaming of people, and that's not Christ-like either. I mean, if you're saying you're a follower of Christ, but I know some people were saying that they don't even want to hear about God, so I don't know. It's kind of hard to not talk about God when it's something that is a part of your life, and it's not because you're trying to force your beliefs on others, but it's just because God is very important in your life, and it's in every aspect of your life. So I understand, I guess, the frustration if that's not what you believe. I definitely don't understand the God is in control thing. People kept saying that all the time, and I'm like, still not sure that that's really what it is. I do think that God may have a plan. I do think that God is in control in a way, but he's not controlling, because we're given free will for a reason. So some of the things that happen we have caused. It's not always him. Sometimes we are responsible for things, and we have to take accountability and not blame everything on God, because not everything is on God. I sometimes think that's a lazy way of thinking. Yeah. Stay peaceful. Have some empathy. Put yourselves in somebody's shoes that's different from you, because it's just, if you're not a believer, just have empathy. That's not, just have empathy. People think the way they think for a reason. It's not always because they're evil humans. It's just because they are human beings who are flawed, and who maybe are in an environment that does not set them up to believe something different. You can't help where you grew up. And you also cannot help that you haven't been outside of your front door. I mean, you could help it. Like, you could go out and do more. But most people stay in their own neck of the woods. People are not moving to different states like that. And most people who I think do move usually do have a little bit more of an open mind. I think people who've been out abroad have more of an open mind. Because sometimes I think in America, it just seems like we're the only country that exists. I mean, that was definitely prominent during the pandemic. It's like everybody was like, well, it's just America. This is not real, because it's only happening in America. And it's like, no, this is a world, it's a global pandemic, guys. Global. Also mentioning the hurricanes. I I also think that can also affect the economy. Hurricanes. A lot of things affect the economy, and I do think the president just doesn't have as much of control over the things that are happening in our personal life. Like sometimes, yes, it does have influence, but it's not immediate influence. So like you might not see the consequences of something until later. Um, Most of Biden's administration was trying to get us through the pandemic, for real. That was the first half. The second half was trying to get, dealing with the wars in different countries and how are we going to support and how are we not, and some people saying we should only support, we should support our country more and not support others. Like, I don't know. That one, I don't know. Once again, people, I also saw somebody post, he should have given more money to people from the hurricane. Once again, he can make a proposal, but Congress has to approve proposal, and maybe he had a number in his brain and they came up with something else. Like, he tried to forgive the student loans. Some people's student loans were forgiven, but some of them weren't. And then once again, he tried to do it, and then the Supreme Court stopped it. So the president does not have as much power as people think. Your eggs are high is that the president's fault, not necessarily the sitting president. But I also don't think that's how economics works in general. Like, the president can't really control that much when it comes to the economy. Those type of effects you're not going to see in 3-4 years. You would see those over the course of several years. But we're all learning. Become educated. Don't die on one hill for one thing when you're voting. That's pretty much it. I hope you have a lovely week and stay positive. Also, feel your feelings, but try to have some positivity. It's cool. Watch your favorite TV show. Listen to the music. Go on a walk. This has been Southern Girl in the City, and I hope you have a lovely week. Bye.